Thank you. This is me. I've already talked about me. I'm going to make me go away. This is Annie, and Annie will be co-presenting with me today. And she's a great resource for our team. And we're going to jump right into talking about today's topic. And so Annie, I'm going to turn this over to you and just tell me when to go to that next slide.
Okay, so we're going to start talking about the anxiety, the stress that comes with the build, with making decisions. And one of the things that was abundantly clear in the 2017 recovery process was, as much as you're rooting on your neighbors for recovery, there is something to be said for coming around a corner and seeing somebody's foundation going in when you haven't gotten that far. Maybe you're not even in contract yet. Your family and friends could ask you, how it's going. Have you picked a builder? There's just a lot of triggers that can make you very anxious about the process. And you need to be patient with yourself. You need to give yourself some grace, and you need to just work at your pace. Next. So this was my rebuild. My rebuild was fairly quick. So I was one of the ones causing people anxiety, unfortunately. 2017 Tubbs Fire, Coffee Park. In December of 2017, no, that's not right. I started my build about 6 months. We messed this one up. About 6 months after our fire. Our fire was in October. So we're talking about March. In May, they started the foundation. It was a lovely sight to see. Rode my bike over there. They had started without me knowing, and it was just like, hallelujah. June, July, we have framing. It's starting to actually look like it's something you can walk through, show off a little bit, be excited about, be stressed about. How's it coming? Do I know what I'm looking at? Here they're starting the interior. The outside is fairly set, and you can see the insulation in the garage. And there's my home. It was quite a process. My process was quicker than many people's. And I was able to do it so quickly because I was part of the group Coffee Strong. And one of my duties that I took on was vetting the big builders. So because I kind of had that inside scoop and I'd interviewed all of them, it made it easier for me to make my decision. I had decided that I didn't want to go with a small builder, as I was worried about what the outcome would be, whether they could file bankruptcy, whether the job would get done. So I went with a big builder because everything that I'd read said the bigger the builder, the better the build you're going to have, the more experience. This was a preset master plan, so it had already been permitted. All that needed to happen was for me to pick out which home plan I wanted, pick out my finishes. It went to the permitting department just to show that it would meet the setbacks criteria, and off they went.
And then at the same time, we had a totally different timeline going. And so this was a rebuild for the Thomas Fire in Ventura. Lot was cleared about 8 months later. Sorry, too many buttons here. 10 months into the rebuild, you can see it's taking shape. 18 months later, she finished just in 2020, but they weren't quite finished, still not done. So this is what it looked like at that point when they moved in. Still working on the exterior. They've got patio furniture for a dining room. Nancy couldn't, they took a lot of their contents to rebuild the house, so they applied it and made things stretch. And then I think they put their, let me go back, they put their front door on about 2 months after they moved in the house. They had a piece of plywood there. They were coming in and out of the back door. It took about 2 months to get their front door and finally be done. And so we're going to pass this over to Mike now, talking about permits. Mike Renner with 4-Leaf.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here and thanks for having me on. I wanted everyone to know that we're going to be here for a while, so I'll be available for questions, anything involving permitting. My firm, we're a private firm, primarily an engineering firm that works with cities and counties. We don't do a lot of work with private companies. And we were brought on in early 2018 to assist in Sonoma County with their fire recovery. And subsequently, and you know, most unfortunately, we've also been brought on. We run the entire rebuild in the town of Paradise, which, as everyone probably knows, I mean, that whole town was decimated. We also run the entire rebuild for the county of Santa Cruz, and we're soon going to be heading up to Jackson County, Oregon, to assist with them. So the reason, just real quickly, the reason that we get reached out to is these cities and counties, they have to do all of their standard business. They won't have the ability to turn these things around like we do. So we generally turn permits around about 5 business days, and we're with the customer, the end user through the whole process. So you really get to know people, and when you see their houses take shape again, like Annie's did, and the folks we helped in Sonoma, it's great when they invite you over for a barbecue and a beer and watch people get their lives back together. So for anyone who's on that did lose their home, just keep the faith. It is a hard process, and we wish you the best through it. And there's a lot of resources out there to help you. Next slide, please. So yeah, best practices for securing a permit. Timing. A lot of stuff here that you can read yourself. I would say one of the main things is, if you have time, be involved. Go to the pre-application meetings with your contractor or your designer, your engineer, your architect. Hear directly from the permitting agency's mouth what you need to hear, as opposed to it being filtered through a third party that you're paying, that wants to stay in a great light with you. Not saying anything nefarious, just get it from the horse's mouth. And then it's never too early to get started and start calling and asking questions. I know for us, we had many people that we had pre-application meetings with that would just come in with stuff written on a napkin and ideas and what's my zoning, and we're happy, and every entity that is helping someone rebuild is happy to work through that with you. Next slide, please.
Mike, before we get any farther,
Sure.
Is there an issue with the permit being in your own name or a licensed contractor? What is the give and take on that?
So no real issue per se. I would say 80–90% of the time the contractor pulls the permit. The downside can be if the contractor is, like happened here in Sonoma County, there was a contractor that came up from the Central Valley, went belly up, and there were people that they paid $100,000 to that were out in the cold. If you want to work as your own general contractor, you certainly can. I would warn folks that it's time consuming. And what's happening now, especially in California, is there's a shortage of subcontractors. There's a higher material cost.
Mm-hmm.
So when your contractor comes out and they secure the permit, they're running the whole show. They have those relationships in place with those subcontractors already and the supply houses. So it can be advantageous, but certainly if you have time and you have some experience, or you have the stomach for it, that permit can be in your name, and you can work as your own general. And
so does it have, if it's in your name, you can't use a licensed contractor, or the contractors don't like to do it that way?
Well, you certainly always have to use licensed contractors,
Right.
Subcontractors, etc. Generally, a general contractor that would take over and run, I don't know, like a Stonefield Development, who did a lot of work in Sonoma County. The permit can be in your name. They can serve as your framer, your concrete folks, et cetera. But if you're hiring them in the capacity as the general contractor to run the show, they're going to want that permit in their name.
Okay, thank you.
Generally speaking. Yeah. So that says it all. I think we're going to talk about that a lot. There's so much anxiety around this. You got to sit back. You have to take those breaths and understand too that, and I'm sure Annie can speak to this, and I know Charles rebuilt his home, I believe. It's always going to take a little longer. It's going to be more expensive, but be budget conscious when you come in. Remember that the contractors, even the ones that have, the best of intentions, they can get overextended. They're always trying to sell you a product. So remember the source of the information. And that's why I say, I'll echo what Annie said. Don't keep up with the Joneses. If so-and-so put their foundation in this week and you're not getting yours for 2 more weeks, relax. Hopefully your insurance is in place. You'll have your cost of living, your ALE. And when that starts running out, then folks, you have a little more anxiety. But there's a lot of folks out there for you. UP is a great firm that a great organization that's here to advocate on your behalf with your insurance companies and other great organizations like Charles Brooks and a lot of good things. So anyway, next slide.
All right, we're jumping into contracts now. And I would throw this open to the 3 of you, Charles included. Anything you want to add to this? I think Mike's just summed up very nicely the beginning part of that. So I'll leave that to Annie. Anything you want to say here?
Contracts was an issue for our rebuild. A lot of people, we advise people to have their contract reviewed by a contract attorney. And that is a big deal. It kept a lot of people out of trouble. The ones who didn't do it, some of them got into trouble. I would like to say that it's important to defer to people's strength. My strength was not as an attorney or as a home builder. So you have to know where to get help. And this was an area that I definitely think you should have reviewed, checked out, make sure that what's in there is correct, and know what isn't in your contract that maybe should be.
So I have a couple things, if I may, on contracts, and I'd like to back up just a second and offer an initial piece of advice for folks that may not have been made aware of this by their lender. But in a federally declared disaster, a lot of lenders are required to offer what's called disaster forbearance on your mortgage. So if you're getting pressure or your neighbors are telling you should pay off your land, stop, talk to your mortgage company, because if you start utilizing insurance proceeds, and then when you get your contract from your contractor and it's going to cost you more to build than you have left in insurance proceeds, you now have to go out and get a construction loan or additional financing to make up that gap. And with disaster forbearance, typically a loan can be put on hold for up to 12 months. Some of them are longer than that, and you don't have to make any payments during those 12 months in most cases. And that's going to give you a little bit of breathing room to where I don't have to pay off my land right away. I'm not making a full mortgage payment on a piece of dirt and a pile of rubble. Nobody told us that. We were one day away from paying off our mortgage when a friend of ours who was a mortgage broker told us to stop. And I'm really glad that he did, because it made it to where our insurance proceeds could go towards the rebuild of our home, and we did not have to go after a construction loan. And the horror stories I've heard from people in our community that now have to go out and get construction financing because they spent a good deal of their insurance proceeds on paying off their mortgage. So if you've done it already, make sure you're starting to research your options for construction financing you may need. But if you have not paid off your mortgage yet, I would strongly encourage you to contact your lender and see if disaster forbearance is available through them. I don't know all the lenders that do it, but once I found out about that, it's my mission to share that with disaster affected folks, that is something to look at, because it gives you that breathing room. And all that it does is it tacks that period of time on the end of your loan. You're just going to want to understand all the nuances with your lender, and it'll be unique, but that is available to you. Getting into contracts, I think one thing, do not enter in, no matter how much you like the contractor and you think they're a great person, they've got everything that you need. Do not let them do anything until you have a signed contract and you have a fixed bid for what you're going to be building. Right now, it's really challenging with material prices, getting a fixed bid from a contractor, but really understand every single line in there. Your allowances, are the allowances reasonable for what your level of taste and what you want to do with your house? If they're giving you $3,000 for windows and you're building a 2,000 square foot home, that's not enough. Second guess some of those numbers. Do some research on your own. Contact window companies. Like every allowance that's in there, if you haven't made that decision already, really understand what those allowances will cover, because a lot of contractors, to get your business, will put in low allowances and then come back afterwards and say, oh, well, that's for baseline, but you're going to want more. And kind of like Mike was saying, contractors make 15% typically on anything that they do for you, any subcontractor they use or any materials. So be wary of that. Know when you're going into it that your allowances are at the level of what you're going to want or expect for your home. And the draw schedule is really important to understand. And you want to know that draw schedule. And so when your contractor says, it's time for draw number 3, you can open up your contract and it'll say, okay, draw number 3 is 4-way inspection after framing. If all that's complete, okay, show me the job card that you passed the 4-way inspection. Now I will write you that $100,000 check or that $75,000 check for the next phase. So really understand your draw schedule too. And this is one of those things that was a constant relationship with my contractor as we were getting closer. I was constantly asking him, hey, we're coming up on a draw, right? That means this, this, and this, just making sure everybody was on the same, same field. And there were no questions when it came time to pay, that they'd pass the inspections that were part of that draw.
And so when Charles is talking about draws, for people who haven't gotten that far yet, there are certain milestones that you hit that then require a payment. And you never want to get ahead of that. You never want the contractor to have more money than what they've completed. And so that what Charles is saying is very, very true. And you need to, that's a big deal. And if you let the contractor get ahead, you could be short in the end.
And to follow up on one thing Charles said, thank you for bringing up the mortgage point, Charles. Fannie Mae and other mortgage companies have a hotline where you can call and get basically financial counseling about your mortgage and things like that. And Eva, I'm going to ask that you pull that off. It's in our disaster libraries for 2020 fires. If you can put that link in the chat, that would be great. But they will provide you up to 18 months of counseling support on your mortgage and financial issues. It's free to any homeowner. So please do take advantage of that to help use professional help to get you through making those decisions. Let me go to the next slide. Let's see. Okay, contract review considerations. And Annie, I'm going to let the 3 of you talk about this.
So having your contract reviewed, we've kind of already covered this in many ways, but I can't impress enough upon you that a attorney really needs to go over this. It's probably the best. I paid $500 to have it done. And some of the things that have come up for us is that people have done estimates. And even though the homeowner may be supplying some of the things in the estimate, it's in the estimate, it gets transferred to the contract, and then the contractor actually is charging you overhead and profit on something that they never even touched. So there's a lot of things in there that just need to be fine-tuned and explained to you.
And then the warranty point, you elaborate on that a little bit.
A warranty is, so your contractor is responsible for different aspects of your build for a period of time. Warranty isn't actually the correct word, but some companies actually use a structural warranty company. which will warrant it for a period of time. And if you can find a contractor who does that, it's not like they have really high standards, these warranty companies, but what they do have is that it's a form of vetting your builder, because they won't offer these warranties for contractors that don't do good work.
Hey, Annie, one thing I think is important for people to know about contracts also is change orders. Change orders are during the course of construction. If your contractor tells you, hey, now's a perfect time to fill in the blank, add a retaining wall, add some landscaping, do something like that, do not authorize any additional work without a written change order for the total amount that it's going to be. Don't let them tell you that, oh, hey, my buddy does this, it's probably going to be around $5,000. Next thing you know, when you get your next draw statement, there's going to be $7,500 on there plus the 15% profit and overhead. So make sure change orders, which are changes during the job, are documented in writing and approved by you before they're ever authorized. And that's going to give you something to fall back on, so you don't get surprises and price changes.
Yep. Good
And
job.
also timing. Change orders can affect your timing. So make sure you know, if you decide you want to upgrade that bathtub or finishes and fixtures, if it's going to delay 6 weeks to get the order in, you need to be aware of those impacts. We're going to touch on fund control briefly.
So fund control is pretty critical to your build. You can do an escrow account where it doesn't matter what your builder asks for. It's going to be completely based on whether you've hit the milestone, you've passed the inspection before the money's released. Otherwise, it's between you and your contractor. And as Charles said, reading about it, knowing exactly what is required for that milestone, making sure that it's actually done before you release that money.
Before we jump, just to go back, Victor had asked a question about the going rates for profit and for overhead. If we have any information on that, since we were just talking about the importance of noting that in the contract.
I think Charles said 15%. I've heard up to 20%.
In our market, it's fairly typical to see 15%. Some builders will do less depending on the size of the job, scope, and your individual case. But 15% seems to be what I've heard from friends and other people that are rebuilding.
And then we had one other question about some contractors charge an extra premium on each change order. Is that normal? And if so, how much should it be?
I would encourage you to find out before you enter into a contract with a contractor how they handle change orders. I don't believe that there should be a surcharge. It should be their standard profit and overhead on top of the change order. So if you're changing out your tile and it's going to add $3,500 to your total tile bill, then the additional profit and overhead should just be on that $3,500. Some contractors, they want to justify a fee for the extra work that's involved, but they're getting paid on that typically. So I'd be, as much as you want to get your home rebuilt fast, I would be wary of somebody who also wants to charge you a fee on top of their profit and overhead for instituting a change order.
And I'll hang on to that question for when Steve Jensen from Colorado joins us. He's with the Building Industry Association there, so we'll hang on to that question. And so fund control, just pointing out, we did have a webinar on this last month. So, please go back to that. If you haven't done that, just to learn more about that topic. Speaking of fund control, this is just a sample of the documentation that you might see. All right, home hardening, Charles. Building resilient.
Oh,
Charles,
no.
I think you're muted, sorry.
So one of the things that our community did after the campfire was we went through a community visioning process, and residents were able to describe the things that they were concerned about in the future before they rebuilt, what was important to them. And a lot of things came up about the safety of our community and future builds, and home hardening tied right into that. And so the town of Paradise, the staff was tasked with going out and taking as many items that were either just anecdotal or that there was actually a fire science behind it in home hardening, and developing ordinances to make our community safer, to incentivize the rebuilding of homes, to make people feel better about it. One of the ordinances that was passed in our community that's significant is called the first 5 feet. And that is nothing combustible within a new home within the first 5 feet. What was witnessed by so many and has been corroborated by countless firefighters who were in the process of saving lives and didn't have a chance to save homes was that fences were fusible links to homes. So you've had fences that were 15, 20-year-old cedar that they just needed a hot ember underneath them, and pretty soon the fence is on fire, and that burned slowly to the house. And because it was connected to the wall of the house is now on fire. A couple minutes later, the entire house is engulfed. So the town passed a first 5 feet ordinance. So this is something that even if your community does not pass it, is good home hardening practice. Nothing combustible within the first 5 feet. If you can put hardscape, do it. It makes a huge difference. Any small embers that get blown up against the side of your house down low, if the first 5 feet is non-combustible, those embers are going to go out with ever setting anything else on fire. One of the things that we saw in our community and we're seeing to this day is innovations in building technology. This can be things like ICF, aerated autoclave concrete, AAC. We're seeing a lot of steel structures go up, things like that. We finally got to see, instead of just the idea of innovations in building technology, we're seeing those things actually hit the ground and gain momentum as people are searching for alternatives to a typical stick-built home. Landscaping plays a critical role in your home hardening and building a home that can withstand the next ember-driven fire. So that's something, there's books out there, there's talks that typically your local fire safe council will have. Even your local nurseries may become well-versed in that, about how to maintain the landscaping around your home in conjunction with your defensible space. It's one of the things that a lot of us are taking to heart. And it's not just, the defensible space is not just your own property. It's the sum of all the parts. It is, what is your neighbor doing? What is your neighborhood? And what is your community doing to maintain defensible space? So you've got multiple properties that are all engaged in this process. So that's one of the things that Firewise communities look at, and several other things. California has WUI guidelines, wildland urban interface guidelines, and codes that are specific to homes that are built in the wildland urban interface. And so we're seeing that those updated codes alone are making for more hardened homes than typically was our previous housing stock. And the rate of homes that withstood the campfire was higher for homes that were built after these code changes went into effect. And that would be something to research in your area. Codes are different state by state, but those do play a significant role. But anything that you can look into in addition to that, that's proven, and as you investigate what you want to build your house out of, take a look at all the things and what makes sense to you and your budget. Next slide. Oh, that's me. We can go to the next slide. The organization that my wife and I started after the campfire was the Rebuild Paradise Foundation, and we're focused on lowering barriers to entry for people as they look to rebuild homes, specifically targeting pre-construction costs. A lot of those crept up, and that way people can maximize what they're putting into their builds. And we do a lot of other things, but if you have any interest, check out rebuildparadise.org. We kind of went over this: no combustible within 5 feet, defensible space, sum of all the parts, your home, your landscaping, your neighborhood, everything else. The updated wildland urban interface codes, those are huge. How decks are constructed, types of roofs, venting, all those things. Also, when you get into windows, doors, and siding, depending on your budget, your windows can have a significant role in your home hardening. And typically by the time you get to windows, your budget doesn't have a ton of room. So you opt for what most of us do, myself included, which is vinyl windows. but there are windows that have metal interior frames that will hold the glass in place to a higher heat than a vinyl window would, further hardening your home. So take a look at those things as you're looking at your rebuild, and are there areas where you can make upgrades within your budget?
And those are things that your insurance company will look at in insuring your new home. Those things are considered as well.
Yeah, next slide. So we talked about innovations. These are just some labels. If you're out there looking, or you hear people talking about ICF, insulated concrete form, AAC, aerated autoclave concrete. The other thing that's really interesting is that if your community, if you're not seeing the partnerships between the jurisdiction, your local fire safe council and fire departments, then you might need to be the person in your community that starts figuring out how to make sure that those partnerships happen. Because rebuilding a resilient community, it takes everybody. And you want to have your fire safe council and your jurisdiction talking regularly. You want your fire department informing the jurisdiction and informing the community, and making sure that you guys are all working together to rebuild your community in a resilient way. So hopefully you don't experience this again in your lifetime.
Charles, Paul has a question about how does he negotiate with his adjuster when using ICF, especially with regard to capturing that extended coverage?
So I didn't build with ICF, so I don't know if I could speak to that directly, but depending on your insurance company, and this is where United policyholders can help you understand extended replacement cost better than I can. Extended replacement cost kicked in for us after the fact that we could prove that material and build costs were so much more than they were pre-fire, what I call disaster economics. It was easy to go to our adjuster and say, same square footage, even with code upgrades, we can't get there. And so that's when they were able to engage the extended replacement cost. So if you can show perhaps comps with ICF versus a traditionally built home, that they're a similar price, or that it's more to do ICF and you can justify it, I think it's going to be understanding your policy specifically and communicating with your adjuster and figuring out how to navigate that, because they may want to understand, why does it cost more? In our area right now, ICF is on par with a traditional stick-built home because of the cost of lumber. So it's something that right now you may be at a cost neutral point, and so ICF would cost you the same as a stick-built home, and then it would be easy to I don't want to say easy, but it would be a clear case, I would think, with your adjuster. Valerie, do you guys do much on the extended replacement cost? Do you guys have the ability to help people navigate?
Yeah, and the biggest thing is just viewing that from the lens of they owe you to replace the house you had. What you choose to rebuild, the amount is is based on what they owe you to replace the house and bring it up to current code, correct? And so to get that, to capture that extended coverage, you're laying out what that house you had was worth and what it would take to rebuild, and then your contract for rebuilding. If you're using ICF or whatever, that's not your estimate to capture those extended coverage dollars. Anyone who has a question specifically about something like that, dealing with your insurer, we have Q&As coming up, question and answers. They're every week. And if you want to go to our website under events, you can put in your question there to get it flagged, to get a professional expert to answer that for you.
I think we also look at this as it never hurts to ask. And it sounds like from what Charles has said, that you might want to educate yourself so you can educate your adjuster and go at it from that point of view, and hope that they're along for the ride on that.
Yeah, and to go back to the IFC, Lori had asked, her contractor saying it's more significantly more expensive. And from what Charles just said, with the incredible cost of lumber right now, it's actually comparable, correct?
That's what we're seeing in our market right now. We actually, because of the way that the market has developed up here, it started with one ICF supplier and builder that came into the market. Now we have 4 or 5 builders who are comfortable with ICF, and they're sourcing multiple suppliers for different ICF components. There's a whole bunch of different companies that make ICF blocks. And now we have contractors getting trained. So now there's competition in the market. If you have 1 or 2 ICF builders that's shown up, your chances are your prices are going to be higher than if you guys can start to maybe in a community next door down the road, you can start asking if there's any ICF contractors that can come to the area and work and start getting some competition in that area as well. Because we've seen that there's definitely more competition in that space because a lot more people are demanding it.
Thank you for that. Next topic, and before we move to the next topic, Mike, I had a question for you from Renner. They got planned to rebuild in Santa Rosa with 5-foot setbacks. She's hearing a rumor that 10-foot would soon be implemented, which would mean they cannot, the design will not fit on their lot. So are you hearing anything about setback changes there? I want to make sure we answer her question.
No, so a few different things. I work for, my contract is in unincorporated Sonoma County. So if you're in the city of Santa Rosa, I couldn't speak to anything related to them. Easiest thing to do, if it's a setback issue, that's not going to be a building code issue. That's going to be a planning ordinance or a zoning ordinance. So you can pick up the phone, call the planning department and say, hey, I heard this is changing. And I'm sure they'd be happy to answer that question. There is a difference, 5-foot setback versus 10-foot setback for building code requirements and fire resistive material requirements in the code now. That could be what you're referring to. In that case, it's not that it can't be 5 feet. It's just that the fire resistiveness needs to change. And that's boring code language that I can certainly send.
Thank you. All right, so let's go to our next topic here, cost savings. And so Annie, you actually did the first one. You utilized the master plan.
I did. It saved me. So when you do a master plan and use a larger builder that's going to bring in, 5 or 10 floor plans for you to choose from, all of the, what they call soft costs, the architecture, the groundwork, I'm not coming up with all the words, sorry. All of that gets dispersed amongst all the builds, which brings the pricing down. And they also can buy in bulk. So if they know they're going to have, 20 of this style and 20 of that style, well, it gives them buying power, which brings the cost down.
Then other options we have are group rebuilds in areas where that is happening. And sometimes it'll be one builder, one general contractor is just he's got 10 people signed up and he's going to sequence them. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. Collective bargaining. If you find you're underinsured and you're able to manage it, i.e. not having a mortgage, you can build an accessory dwelling unit, and then when you're able to replace the home and use that as a rental and help offset that cost. I know both in Camp and Santa Cruz and some areas in Oregon, people are looking at tiny homes. Colorado is also looking at tiny homes. They're partnering with Tiny Home Nation. And then landscaping, for a lot of people, you end up with nothing at the end. And so there's, we'll talk about the succulent parties in a minute. And then including in your contract tasks that you can handle yourself. So a lot of people will carve that out from the contractors. Mike, you got something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the group rebuild side and on the economy of scale side, there's oftentimes, even before you're at the point of drawing your building plans, there can be municipal or jurisdictional requirements for, you might have to have your property surveyed by a licensed land surveyor. You might have to have a geotechnical engineer out to do borings on your property to determine what type of foundation system are involved. And those are very, very expensive one-offs. Geotechnical engineer to come out with a drill rig, $8,000 to $12,000 for one lot. Surveyors anywhere from $2,000 to who knows how much, depending on the lot size. But those are another couple areas where the economy of scale really works. And certainly if you get people who are local, the geotechnical engineers that live and work in the areas where these fires happen, they were very, very open to serving their communities. And I saw people pay as low as $500 for a letter that they knew, you know, on the neighbor's property line, there was a boring done and everyone split costs. So think of those other things, even after your build. You guys all need fences. Go get a fencing contractor, economy of scale. Don't just loop it into the build itself.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback on that a little bit. A lot of the homes in last year's fire were, they were more rural. They have septic tanks, wells that need to be checked out. They will all need solar. You know, if there's 10 people on a street, you can have 3 people figure out, you know, interview solar companies and then go in bulk. Doesn't have to be everybody, but it can help with bringing the price down. I mean, if you get 10% off of a lot of these different things, sprinkler systems, electric car ready, there's a lot of things you can piggyback. And if someone in a trade comes in, they can do all the work in one area. It's more beneficial to them, so they may be able to pass on that savings to you.
Thank you for that. Sorry for bouncing on the slides. It's just I wanted to piggyback and follow up with what Mike and Annie were talking about. So going back to the group rebuilds, we had someone from Stonefield who was going to be presenting with us today and not able to join us. They're a group that worked in the 03 and 07 fires in California, worked in Sonoma, and they're currently rebuilding in these 2 communities, just to flag that there is an option for that. So what's that, St. Helena and Napa.
And we should explain that part of what they did in Sonoma County was they rebuilt an area, and they did like 8 different designs for the great room kitchen type thing, and people got to pick those. So they were getting some customization to their home, but they were getting economy of scale also. And it's more than worth your while if you have a group of neighbors who would like to do something like this, to interview people and see if anybody is interested in this.
Thank you. And Charles, one question for you popped up. What's the cost of AAC? How does that compare to timber built?
So I can't say what those costs are. I haven't priced out any of those homes. I know we've been able to see a few of those homes go up, but it is only one builder and one mason partnership that are building the homes here. So you would have to do some research in your own market to see, is someone familiar with AAC, and then are they, you know, what kind of pricing you can get there, and you just have to look locally and see who can do that.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, grabbing questions as I can there. About the ADUs, this is if that's something you're looking at, each jurisdiction will have, you know, the call outs of how to do it, what they allow, what they don't. This is an example from the city of Boulder. Tiny homes, as I mentioned, Tiny Home, Operation Tiny Home is working across the country, and they've flipped to working in disaster communities. So they partner with Milwaukee. I know they just made a big splash in Colorado, and I believe they're looking at Oregon as well. This is their information if you're in there. I know a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of counties are looking at how can they permit. And so tiny homes might not look like what you expect a tiny home to look like. A lot of jurisdictions are looking at them and saying, we don't want it on wheels. It must be on a real foundation. And so they're willing to accommodate from a square footage standpoint and smaller footprint, but they don't want it to be mobile. And that also feeds into financing, because some of the lenders, a lot of the credit unions are offering that opportunity.
So vetting and hiring a contractor. I'd like to hear Charles' viewpoint on this also. I think it's one of the hardest things to do. It's very, you know, there's a lot of questions to ask. Some of it's your gut instinct. Some of it is doing your homework. You know, they are going to give you their best clients to talk to. They're not going to give you the ones that they've had any problems with. So you need to look at the Better Business Bureau. You need to look at Yelp. You need to check their licensing. In Sonoma County, I can tell you that we had some not so great contractors, and there is nothing on their record because it's a really tough process of getting a ding against them, quite frankly. So there's not a lot of, you're not gonna get you can't just look at the licensing board and go, oh, his license is clean, so we're good. It just does not work that way. So your best bet would be to meet as many as you can, talk to them, walk away, come back, talk to some people that they've actually built for. Word of mouth is probably your best bet on this. Charles, what would you like?
Well, Steve just joined us, so let me get Steve in here. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
Hi there.
All right, so we're
Can you hear me all right?
yeah, we can hear you good. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So Annie, I'm with you on this. The old adage of get three quotes, do the same thing for your house. Have 3 contractors. We have in California, we have builders exchanges. You may have those wherever you're at. Your local builders exchange should have a list of licensed contractors that the builders exchange responsibility is to maintain a list of licensed and insured contractors. That's a great place to start. You can't beat word of mouth. And my contractor was actually pretty straightforward when he met with us the second time. And he said, I want to let you guys know, if you select me, this is going to be a marriage. And we're going to have to learn how we work together, how we communicate, and how we're going to work through this process together, because there are going to be times that are going to be challenging. There's going to be highs and lows. You're going to be frustrated at points. I'm going to be frustrated at points. We got to figure out how we're going to work through this. And I think it's a great analogy of, it's a new relationship that you're going to be in for 1 to 2 years as you look, well, I don't know, depending on what you're building, but this is somebody that you're going to have to be able to work with. So getting an idea of their style, you want to make sure that both, if there's 2 of you, that, if you're married, if you have a partner, whatever it is, if it's not just you who's making the decisions and working with the contractor, both of you have to be on board with this individual. You have to know and trust that they are going to do right by you, and that the quality that you expect is what they have shown you and their customers have shown you they're capable of. Don't just look at pictures, go walk through homes that they have built. Look at the fit and finish. Are they the type of person that you feel comfortable building your home? And then honestly, are they the type of people that you would welcome into your home once it's built? Are they the type of people you'd want to have around your family? That's how I looked at it. And it took a long time to figure out who we wanted to build our home, because this was our whole life. This was our insurance. This is all we had. So we wanted to make sure it was the right fit. All at the same time, you may be looking at, there's not a lot of contractors available. I might have to take what I can get. Be patient, take a deep breath, and work hard to find a contractor that you know, like, and trust that can be part of the process with you.
All right, and then I'd like to officially welcome Steve Jensen. He's with the president of the Grant County Builders Association. He is a contractor, and he's going to be presenting in a bit. But Steve, is there anything you'd like to add on selecting picking up that contractor?
Well, I think that gentleman kind of took the wind out of my sails, because he covered all the key points. Really, it's a long-term relationship. The marriage analogy is a great one. The other thing I talk about is, short of your physician and your attorney, you become more intimate with your builder than most professional relationships. So it's important that you're comfortable with them. And I really think it's, at the end of the day, I think it's trusting your gut, but doing your homework. So checking the references. Obviously, well, I would say obviously people are going to give you good references. I would say that there's a surprising amount of times that people actually check references, and I would recommend it, not because you expect them to say something bad about the builder, but because they're going to put it in their own terms and talk about it from their perspective, versus a builder that is obviously looking at it from a professional standpoint.
Thank you. And then here you are officially. And this is the publication they have on their website, just telling people what to remember when hiring. And I love, Steve's comment at the end of this first section here, always do your homework and proceed with care. And I think that echoes what Mike and Charles and Annie have all been saying today.
Agreed.
And then Steve, these are the call outs and looking, right?
Yep. So, I think for people that haven't built before, that it gets back to that earlier comment about trust and knowing that you're hiring a professional that's going to take care of these things, but use that form we put on our website as a checklist. Ask them questions. And for somebody that does this for a living, they're going to be very easy answers. If you find somebody stumbling over answers or evading answers, then that would cause me to have a little bit of a red flag. The piece I want to stress is there's nothing magic about building houses, but if you've never done it before, it for sure can feel overwhelming. And you want to rely on a professional that has the knowledge, the experience, and the relationships to get it done. So the challenge that was alluded to earlier is, depending on the market you're in, there may just not be available contractors and trades to deal with the volume. And so we've seen it in other boom times, not recovering from disasters, but when the demand is up and qualified contractors are scheduled out a couple of years, people lower their standards, and unfortunately we see bad experiences come from that. Unqualified individuals taking on projects that results in a negative experience for everybody that's involved. And it really does come back to buyer beware. Ultimately, you've got to do your homework and make sure that you're asking the questions to get the answers so that you're comfortable with the process moving forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I had a few specific questions for you being a contractor. So one of the questions that came up, Steve, was some contractors are charging an extra premium on each change order. And is that normal? And if so, how much should it be?
Good question. And I would say change orders maybe shouldn't be considered a dirty word, but it is fair to charge more for a change order because there's a snowball effect of what happens when a change is made after the work is started. And I'll just give you an example. We have a project going after the framing was complete. The owners decided they wanted to add some windows. We said, great, we'll add some windows. So you have the cost of the windows. You have the cost of the framing to modify those openings. You have trim on the outside of those windows. All the windows have to be stained and finished. You have trim on the inside of the windows. You have the material that goes along with all of that work. And in this case, we had engineering that took place as well. So all those pieces have to be orchestrated, and that kind of puts the project on hold while the manager is dealing with those decisions. So I would say it's not unreasonable to see a premium of 5% on top of whatever the agreed upon contract fee was percentage. So if the normal percentage was 15 and you have change orders that get processed at 20, I think that's reasonable. If they're being processed at 100, that seems a little excessive.
Right. And a lot of that is just if trying to make those decisions ahead of time with your builder so that you can just get your process moving and not have a change order, right?
Correct. And I think that's a key piece we haven't talked on. The other person that's party to this is the design team. So you could hire the best builder in the world, but if you're working with substandard plans, you're more likely to see change orders come about.
Thank you.
So I'd like to touch on that for just a second, because one of the issues that we had in Coffee Park rebuilding was that some people thought that they were architects, they were designers. So when something started to take shape, then all of a sudden they went, oh no, that doesn't look right. And then they had change orders. So you really have to depend on the people who know what they're doing to do their job, the jobs that we don't have.
Mike?
Oh yeah, sorry. I wanted to add something that it's going to be relevant to everyone. And Steve brought up a great point on when you have a set of building plans and you submit those plans to your city, county, town, locality for approval. What they're looking for is approval with minimum code compliance. That has very little, oddly enough, to do with buildability. So I've seen plans that passed muster for minimum code compliance because it said a lot of, had a great cover sheet with a lot of code language on there. And you open up the plans and the details are lacking. It's an unbuildable set of plans. So I can't echo enough what Steve said there. Don't rely when you see a stamped set of plans from town of whatever that says approved for code compliance. You go, hey, I got a buildable set of plans here, builder. What's wrong with you? That's simply not the case. So just keep that in mind. And I'll caution people that also goes to, I'll use California. Say you're in California and you see a really cool set of building plans online. You want to buy those and then you get those plans and they're drawn to Florida standards. You're paying a local architect and engineer 15 grand to make those buildable in California for your seismic zone, your wind zone, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to get too boring with that, but I just want to echo Steve's point.
Well, that's actually one of our questions we had is, what if I wanted to use my plans for my house, but on a different site in the city versus the county? And so she's got some insurance questions that play in there, but I think both of you made a really good point that just because you have those plans that worked on that site doesn't mean they're going to work at the other one. The engineering will be different on the site. So many different things.
Right. And for good, bad, or indifferent, the code cycle that we live in, the International Code Council, they push out new codes every 3 years. My joke is always they got to sell books every 3 years. So the code changes every 3 years. Engineering doesn't change that much, but California is on a strict 3 year. There's areas in the central California, in the middle of the country and out west, maybe on a 6 year cycle. But if you had a set of building plans from 1980 that were code compliant, it's very unlikely those will be compliant now. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right.
Yeah, good point. For those of you in Grand County, I can tell you that the current code we're operating under is 2015. So we're passing the 6 year mark and we're getting ready to start the code adoption for the 21 code cycle.
Ooh. So getting it in now is going to be good, right? Getting the plans in now.
We're beginning the process.
Okay.
It won't go into effect for quite some time.
Okay,
So
good.
one of the things that happened in Santa Rosa as our codes were changing, we have our group Coffee Strong, and they were able to talk to the city, bring it to their attention that we were going to have a code change in the middle of this, and that people had plans that were already at architecture, and they extended all of that for our build. And so that may be something if you are in one of those communities that the code will change in the process, that you need to really lobby for yourself.
Steve, I had a question for you. Speaking of permits and plans, if permits are not approved, you can't get them to approval to move in, right? Does the contractor have to get them? And if so, do you want the contractor to do it so that they don't get paid until you get the final pass and you don't have a mess? Is that a good strategy, or what does that look like?
I'm not sure I understood the question. You're saying if you don't have the final inspection?
So if the contractor has to, if the contractor has to get the permits to get paid, they have to get the permits are in their name and they have to get the final pass to get paid. That's the question they've got. So because we had the question earlier about who would have the permit in their name. Is it you or the contractor?
Oh, understood. Okay. I would recommend that it be in the builder's name. And I think that's more of a broad question about project completion. But quite frankly, the final, what we call certificate of occupancy or final inspection, generally takes place before project punch list completion, if you will. So we don't recommend paying the contractor until the punch list is complete. You get to a point of substantial completion, and you should be paying monthly draws and not submit that final monthly draw until the project is done.
So in California, or at least in Santa Rosa, we've had some issues with people getting temporary or final, and the builder is no longer showing up. So you really do want to, just because you get occupancy or your build is finalized, the city doesn't recognize that. If you don't have baseboards, the city doesn't care about that. What they care about is that you have all the safety things. You have access, you have a driveway, you have lit up numbers, all the different code things is what they're looking for, not necessarily the quality of your build or the finish of your build.
Got it.
That's,
And then, go ahead,
I just
Mike.
want to add, that's a great point. There's a Steve, I'm sure can attest, the codes just grow and grow. The family of codes is huge, and there's 500 reference standards that go with it. And there's one code that references workmanship, and that's the National Electrical Code. And it talks about installations being done in a workmanlike manner, pretty broad. Nothing else. When that C of O or that TCO has that strictly minimum code compliance, is it going to kill you? Are the stairs going to fall down? Do you have railings up? That has nothing to do with the punch list. Steve, I'm sure, knows and can attest that punch lists can be short or long. So make sure you're comfortable with your contract, and make sure that contract is drafted in a way that not only the legalese that we talked about, but you get your final draw at completion of punch list versus C of O or TCO.
Agreed. The thing I would recommend is to expect that the handoff process would be done in what we call an orientation walkthrough. That's when you officially get handed the keys and it becomes your home. It's no longer a job site. And at that point, it should be a 100% done. Now, there could be an instance in the mountains, if we turn a house over in February, maybe the landscaping in the driveway is not complete. Well, you can still move in, and the interior of the house should be 100% complete, and you're not going to pay for the work that has not been complete on the outside because of winter conditions, for instance.
Got it. Steve, we had a question about the rising prices of construction materials, speaking specifically lumber and rebar. And so the question is it standard acceptable for the contractor to ask for 50% material payment once you approve the contract so they can order and receive the materials at current costs?
I would say that's a new standard, but it's a prudent thing. Lumber pricing we're trying to address it on a national level. I was on a call with our local congressmen and senators this week. It's front of mind for our building industry because it's crippling the amount of cost that it's adding. The fact is that the lumber yards, the retail end of it, it's out of their control too. And so the fairest thing you can do, they're not going to give you a firm price until you make that purchase. So if you pre-buy that lumber, it at least secures that price from going up further. It's not something we've done historically, but I see it happening every day now.
And it's just a reality of the market, unfortunately, right now.
Correct.
Got it. All right. And then
sorry, one thing I should clarify is that should not be a 50% of the total contract amount. That should be a percentage of the, maybe prepaying for the lumber package. So don't put down too much money. If you have $1 million house, it might be $100,000 lumber package. So that would be reasonable to prepay for, but not $500,000.
got it. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And while I'm just running through the license resource verification, one of the questions we had is it appropriate or necessary to have penalties associated with your builder not meeting deadlines if it's not your fault? You didn't do a change order, you didn't do anything to get in the way.
Personally, I'm not a fan of liquidated damages or penalties for that, but it should be clearly addressed in the contract. So there may be weather delays that are not the fault of anybody, for instance, or a material shortage, or we've had a countertop show up to be installed and it's broken when it's taken off the truck, and that causes a delay. It's not somebody's fault. It just happens. So my answer to that is, you know, if you're looking to have a penalty for a delayed completion, would you also pay an early incentive bonus? So
Right,
I
and
think
I've
it goes
seen
both ways.
contracts with both. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so these are the Colorado license resources, California. All of this material will be available to you afterwards. So don't scramble trying to write it down. They're just here for you. Warning signs. So I know Annie's got some cautions here. I'm sure Steve, Mike, and Charles all have some things you want to avoid or you want to look for in hiring a contractor.
Yeah, anytime you have a contractor and you look up their license and they've had multiple licenses and they've just changed the name a little bit, you can look at their bond companies. If they've gone through bond companies, more than likely, it's because the bond company had to pay out. They went to arbitration and they were found lacking. A short-term business, Yelp, Facebook pages speak volumes. But I think for our area, if it seemed to be too good to be true, it generally was. And so when someone comes into it, especially a disaster zone, and they say, we're going to give you this and we're going to give it to you at this great price, and all you're going to have to do is show up and turn the key and the house is yours. And it fits in your insurance because you're underinsured. That's when you're susceptible to signing with the wrong person. You need to make sure that it actually makes sense. Nobody's going to come to you and offer to build a house for a subpar price just to be a good guy. It doesn't happen. So we actually had people in our neighborhood who went with Cheramonte, who is up on fraud charges, and then they jumped in with the next goofball because that's what they were looking for, someone who fit into their financial dynamics. So you really need to pay attention to those warning signs.
And Steve, I know you had told me it costs what it costs to build the house. And if you need to make the house smaller or scope it to what you've got, you need to be very clear what that is, right?
That's correct. I mean, the old saying, it costs what it costs and you get what you pay for, is true to an extent, because there can be people out there that are taking advantage of the situation. But at the end of the day, if you're talking to professional, legitimate builders, you ought to be seeing pricing within a single digit percentage difference if you're doing an apples to apples comparison. So, you know, what kind of window package does it have? That could be a number on a 3,000 square foot house. A high-end window package could be $60,000, and an entry-level window package could be $15,000. They're still windows, but that doesn't mean you're getting the same thing.
And Charles, did you have something to add there? I know you, in Paradise, you're seeing a lot of stuff too.
Yeah, and I would say that be skeptical of the person who showed up and they say they're local. They give you they have a new local phone number, but their truck doesn't have their license number on it, and you get a weird vibe, or their phone number is from an area code that's out of state, and they're saying they're local because that's what a lot of people gravitate towards is I want to use a local builder, somebody who knows the area. But if you weren't looking for a contractor prior to your disaster or needing to build your home, do some homework and make sure that they fit what you're looking for. And the other piece of advice that I heard given a lot that I actually find kind of helpful is the contractor right out of the gate who says, well, how much insurance money do you have? I feel like that should be a warning sign. I think the conversation should be more of a, what are you looking to build? Let's talk about your plans and let's build a budget. And does this work for you? But right out of the gate, how much money do you have? Of course, there's opportunities there for somebody who may not be a true professional to say, oh, I can build a house for that. And then all of a sudden now you think this is your only option. Make sure you you're getting your plans together, you're working with your builder or builders to get quotes and understand really what the cost is and compare those, just like Steve was saying, you know, that as long as you're apples to apples, you should be within a couple percent of each other. And then from there, you can realize, is this going to work within our budget? Or you can start talking square footage approximates. Hey, I saw that you built this house down the road. What would I be looking at approximately a square foot for a similar house with similar finishes? Then you can get a ballpark and you can know that, okay, if that house is going to cost $230 a square foot, well, I know what my budget is after talking with my insurance company, and I know how many square feet I want to build. You're kind of getting an idea of where you want to be. But it's also not fair to go to a builder and say, hey, how much do you build for a square foot? Because there's so many variables that go in there. So when you're working with professionals, it shouldn't just be how much money do you have. I don't think so anyway.
Thank you.
One other warning sign I would mention that isn't on the list, but we talked about it earlier. The question about who should pull the permit. If a builder suggests that the homeowner pull the permit, I would consider that a warning sign, because the builder in our jurisdiction has a requirement to be a registered contractor, and that requirement does not apply to homeowners.
Got it. That's actually really good to share. Before we jump out of, I've got a construction company, I think that's appropriate for you, Steve. What is an appropriate holdback amount to get that builder to get the permits finalized and the punch list complete?
So I guess just vocabulary, I don't call it permits, it's final inspections
Got it.
and completing the project. So, I think somebody else made the comment earlier, really the final draw, and builders may do it differently, but I think you're going to see pretty typically it's a monthly draw process, and that draw process should be based on a percentage completion. And so I don't know if there's a magic number of retention. Obviously, if there's things like we alluded to, if it got closed in the middle of winter and so you still have to come back and do landscaping and paving, those should be line items in the budget that you know exactly what they are. So if you were just looking for a percentage to make sure they came back and filled some nail holes and took care of some drywall dings or something, on a $1 million project, I think 2% is reasonable.
Okay, thank you. All right, so building code upgrades or ordinance and law coverage. What's included in your code upgrades? A lot of this is policy specific. It's the amount to bring the home you lost up to current building codes up to your available limits. And so this is breaking out the things that were not there but need to be added. Annie had alluded to some of these before: sprinklers, solar, depending on what state you're in. If your home is older, windows typically have single pane windows are not to code anymore. It's what double, in some states triple pane. There's different requirements there. The amount is determined by your old home. But the problem is this coverage is usually pays as incurred, meaning that you've spent the money. So for a lot of people, they want to know that they've got that money available to them, and it is available, but during the rebuilding process. So I just want to bring that up. And so here's some examples, and Steve and Mike and Charles pop in with any that that we're missing or we should talk about. Here's an example of a sample building code for the city of Santa Rosa, which is where Annie is from. And this is referencing that wildland urban interface that Charles was talking about earlier. So these are the types of things that are required. And this is where the jurisdiction actually built this as a publication to provide to survivors to use for insurance purposes. If their contractor wasn't able to help, it was just a backup documentation. And if your jurisdiction has not provided it, and your builders association has not provided it, it's a great tool to request. You can ask your county supervisors to help pull that together with the building department, permit department.
And it's really up to your builder, and Steve could speak to this, of putting this information together for your insurance. It's very hard for a layman to do it. The difference between the year of your house was originally built to the codes now. That's what they're trying to figure out. So it's not like every house is going to have the same code upgrades. It's going to vary depending on when your house was built.
And these are more examples, like if you're, you're doing, what's the difference in the cost for those higher efficiency plumbing fixtures? Mike, I see your,
Hi, yeah, I wanted to add something, and before I start going on this, I wanted to say that my comments are not endorsed by United policyholders. But so the idea of a requirement for a code upgrade letter in itself, I think is I think it's nefarious. I think it's the idea of it should, I think it should be illegal, the whole idea of it. So the insurance company is basically saying, we've insured you for all these years, and gee whiz, we have no idea what our financial liability on that product is. It's BS. It's total BS. So what if you live in a jurisdiction where, say in, I don't know, Colorado Springs, Colorado, they decided you gotta put solid gold toilets in, the mandate. So the insurance company's gonna come back and go, gosh, we didn't know about that, we're not gonna pay you. The insurance company has code experts on board. I've talked to them at length. I've argued with them. I've advocated on behalf of policyholders. They know exactly to the dollar what they should be giving you for your house that's built in 1971 and the code upgrades that are required. So I do this on every one of these. I've written, and my staff has written, specific to us, to each structure, thousands of code upgrade letters. I'll offer that service at no charge to anyone who needs it. I always do. And, I hope on a state and federal level, we can advocate against this. They know exactly what their liability is, and they lie to you and say they don't know what it is. So, again, that's not you talking, that's me. But
yeah, California just, the bill that took effect this year just changed that for us for future fires. And then Oregon is actually, RED testified at a hearing for them today to pass something that accommodates that, to make this a non-issue. I mean, right now it is what it is, and to get paid, you're having to document to their satisfaction, because as we all know, claims handling is a black box. You don't see they don't disclose to you the steps you have to do to be paid appropriately. They just ask you for more information. And these are just two more examples just to show you the type of thing, so for the breaker box, this, that, and the other, fire sprinklers. Steve, anything to add here?
Just an apology for dropping the call. My battery died. But I would say another piece that could be more substantial is energy code upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we have a varied audience with people in all different markets, but that's one that if there's an energy code in place that wasn't when the house was built initially, could be a substantial increase.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. Charles?
Yeah, on the energy side, in California, most homes that were lost were built with 2x4. Now you have to have 2x6 in order to get the insulating value. And now with lumber prices where they're at, those are easy areas to capture a ton of money if you have to justify just a wall thickness alone and the additional lumber and the additional insulation. Energy was a huge part of our ability to capture the code upgrades, because it affected everything from windows to wall thickness, water. It affects almost every system in the home.
Thank you. And I know with we had worked with the Grand County Builders Association to provide some estimators who would go through that, and most of them worked in using Xactimate, which is what the insurance company typically uses. And and they can plug that in. It's like Mike was saying, they have that ability to plug it in. If the code has gone from a 2x4 to 2x6, they know what that is, and they've got the cost breakout for that as well. So it's not rocket science. It's just painful to do. And if they're pushing it on you, at least like Charles and Steve said, go for those high ticket items to capture it, because you're only going to get it up to the policy limits anyway. And deep breath. We've got a little bit more to go. Let me pull up the questions, and I'm really sorry, my mouse goes everywhere. I don't know how to make it invisible. So for all of you getting seasick when I'm running around to open the Q&A in the chat and unmute myself, I'm really sorry about that. It's I'm having a tech moment here with the mouse working. So about code upgrades, we did have a question on that. Rena's insurance company said they require the code upgrades to be broken out in an invoice to be paid as incurred. Our builder said they cannot do that. Their subcontractors don't invoice like that. Is that true? And Steve, that's probably true, right? Rena, if you want to put in the chat who your insurance company is, that might be something if we've got other people with that insurance company to be able to see if they are not requiring that for other people with that insurance company. So if you could put your
Steve is back on now.
I'm sorry.
Steve is back on.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
sorry. That's a good point, because just use the electrical contractor as an example. He's going to price out the cost of what it requires him to do it to today's code. He's not going to do the analysis of what it would have been 10 years ago. That's not within his scope.
All right. Thank you. And so these are just a few insurance related questions that we're going to hit to, and then we'll wrap up our questions. We've got some detailed workshops on this, but just to recap, your max dwelling limits, what you have available to build. You're looking on that deck page for the max for the main dwelling. You're looking at your other structures, your dwelling extension. If you've got an inflation formula and any endorsements like the extended replacement coverage and what that percentage is or that dollar amount, and then what would be called building code upgrades or ordinance and law. Those are the numbers that you're looking at. And this is what it looks like on a policy. So here's your dwelling, here's the increased dwelling up to that amount. Ordinance and law is 25%. And then one of the questions we get a lot is why are they only paying the actual cash value? And that is they'll pay you that depreciated amount for your home that was lost. That's what they owe you until you replace it. Until it's repaired or replaced. And so you'll get that initial payment because that's what they owe you at that point. And then once you've got your contract and they're doing the work, then they'll pay you that difference. And Annie, correct me on anything that I'm misstating here. This is one of the questions we see a lot. Can you build a house for less money than your full extended coverage and pocket the difference? The answer is no. Can you add I'm sorry, this thing is, I'm not touching anything, I promise you. My hand is away from the keyboard. Can you buy a bigger, better house, adding in your own money or loan? Yes.
Yeah.
And what do they owe you? So the big thing, they owe you like, kind, and quality. That scope of loss that tells you what it would cost to replace. It gets into this difference of Xactimate versus what Steve's talking about, where you've got sub bids, trades, a real estimate to build the house, which is based on a real contractor's understanding of the work to be done. They're not going to pay you for your code required upgrades unless you have code upgrade coverage. And I know this was in one of the questions we had. You don't have to build the identical home you had, but the payout is going to be limited to as what you had, that home as was. And then if you're, say, for example, if you want to add an extra bedroom, they're only going to pay you if you had 3 bedrooms, 2 baths to rebuild that one house. They're not going to cover that additional square footage, but you can add your money in from other sources to make that happen. And this is the language of what like, kind, and quality would look like. I'm going to run and just get rid of the screen really fast. So thank you to our California funders, our Colorado funders, Oregon and Washington. Upcoming events are here. Just go to our website under uphelp.org events. You'll see our upcoming events, and then there are recordings of the prior ones under past events there. Mental health hotline. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to bring up some of the questions we've got. Sorry. I think this is going to be Annie and Mike. Is AAC permittable in Sonoma County?
That would have to be for Mike, because I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so AAC it's not a prescriptive method in construction in the California Residential Code. A while back, we permitted a couple under what's called an AMMR. It's an alternate means and methods request, which basically says that this type of building is, structurally and fire safety wise equal to or above, a stick frame or other more standard types of construction. So if you were interested in it, I'm certain we can push it through. Be aware, I think there's only one contractor around that's doing that work. I have no opinion on him one way or the other, but when there's one, like I think Charles noted, when there's one person doing something, it's generally a little bit higher priced. And I'd like to add too that none of these methods or materials we've talked about are fireproof. So there's a contractor up in Paradise that runs around with all of his trucks that says fireproof homes, right? Nothing's fireproof. So you can build a concrete house and you can get so much heat generated on one side of that wall that thermal transference can implode everything on the inside of that house. It can weaken the concrete. Certainly it's, the WUI codes strengthen, different types of material are stronger, but just be aware if you're looking for something that's, fireproof, it's not there. What's important is vegetation clearance away from your house. What Charles talked about, having those non-combustibles, have some of that hardscape around your home, and just, be buyer beware. Just be careful when you're talking to folks about, if it sounds too good to be true, it is, right? So it's not fireproof.
Well, and also, as Mike is saying, the windows and the doors are not going to be cement. So you're going to have a point of entrance on any of this stuff. So just bear that in mind.
Okay, next question. With the fire considered a federal disaster designation, I heard that it allows additional extended replacement on top of what the insured policy declaration. I haven't heard anything about that, Annie.
No, nothing.
Unless it's something written in your policy for the glass, I don't know there.
Or it's another state, because I'm not necessarily familiar with anything but California, but nothing I've heard in California.
All right, and so do you recommend using an architect only for design, or can a designer meet all the code requirements successfully?
So trying to base this broadly, I don't know where you're based. The building code has two different tracks. One's prescriptive construction, which is basically follow these steps. It's laid out for you, ABC. Then there's performance-based construction. I'll give you an idea. If you ever seen a house that has, one wall is just a plate of glass, that's going to be performance-based. An engineer designs some sort of moment frame or seismic system to transfer load from the roof down in the event of a wind or seismic event. A non-licensed designer or draftsperson can certainly draw up a set of plans that are compliant with prescriptive based construction. And then if there's components of that house that need engineering, oftentimes they have a relationship with an engineer they use. Portal frame for a garage door. Say you got a really big garage door, you don't have a lot of meat or wall on either side. Portions can be engineered. So the short answer is yes, and it depends on what type of house you're building.
All right, let's see. Annie, can you look in the chat and see if we have anything there? I think we've got all those, right? Yeah. Actually, Pamela, Steve, question for you. Is there a different license for a modular home rebuild contractor in Colorado?
No, the modular home still has to be built to the code of the jurisdiction that it's delivered to, but the inspections take place at the modular factory. So,
Got it.
I mean, there's certain aspects that are done on site for sure, but yeah, that's coordinated, typically coordinated by the modular provider.
All right, and let's see. Diane, your question about depreciation is a contents question, and Eva will put in the chat the webinar we did on that. Let's see, I think that's it for questions that we had for you guys. So if you have any other questions, please put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I know we've got about 5 minutes over, and I appreciate, let's see, Paul had asked, is Auto Club AAA known to be supportive of homeowners? I will say, just like for any insurance company, it depends on your adjuster, your policy language, and how well you advocate. Some insurers are, policies are, their claims handling is better, but their policies are not as good. Others have great policies, not as good at claim handling. And so it really, it just depends. It's like any of this, unfortunately, Paul. And so last call for questions. Steve, thank you for putting us at the end of a very busy day for you and taking a call in the field. Thank you, Charles and Mike, for joining us today. We appreciate all of you. Just a reminder, please take advantage of any upcoming events. And any last words from you guys, just with people on rebuilding that home?
Be patient.
Know that you didn't ask for this. It's not something you desired to do. But so you will have to take the time to educate yourself. It's not like it's going to be, oh, wow, I'm getting a new home and I'm so excited. Just take it one step at a time, because it's a recovery process and you're going through this grieving process while you're building, and it's a difficult situation.
I'd like to tag on to what Annie said. There are going to be highs and lows in the process, and some things you're not going to understand why it's a high or why it's a low for you, but it's an unbelievable marathon. But if you decide to do it, when you make it to the end, I mean, we're not quite at the end yet. There's still work left to be done. Steve, if you could talk to my contractor a little bit, that'd be great. All joking aside, though, it's worth it, and believe it or not, you're a lot stronger than you think you are. One thing that was recommended to me early on is to find a disaster buddy, somebody that you can call when you're stressed out, when you don't know which way to turn, somebody who's not emotionally invested in your project like your spouse or your partner may be, somebody that you can just call and have a second set of ears, a second set of eyes, and just talk you off the ledge, or just be there to listen, because this process is stressful. You're also dealing with recovering total loss in your life, and that is really, really difficult. But you're stronger than you think, and it's totally worth it.
All right, well, thank you all, and have a good luck, and we're rooting for you, and please do take advantage of anything we offer, and the video and the slides will be available to you afterwards. They'll be on our website, and you can also request them by email at info@uphelp.org. Thank you, and Eva, you can close us down. Appreciate it all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Charles, Steve, Mike, Valerie.